Hey, Porter Potato here. I have found a new work that I wanted to jump into. This one is called The Candle of Vision. This is by George William Russel. Otherwise known, I think his pen name is A.E. or Eon, which is cool. But without further ado, I'm just going to jump right in. Alright, so the first chapter is called Retrospect. I had traveled all day and was tired, but I could not rest by the hearth in the cottage on the hill. My heart was beating with too great an excitement. After my year in the city, I felt like a child who wickedly stays away from home through a long day, and who returns frightened and penitent at nightfall, wondering whether it will be received with forgiveness by its mother. Would the mother of us all receive me again as one of her children? Would the winds with wandering voices be as before the evangelists of her love? Or would I feel like an outcast amid the mountains, the dark valleys, and the shining lakes? I knew if benediction came, how it would come. I would sit among the rocks with shut eyes, waiting humbly as one waits in the antechambers of the mighty, and if the invisible ones chose me as a companion, they would begin with a soft breathing of their intimacies, creeping on me with shadowy affection like children who still nigh to the bowed head, and suddenly whisper fondness in the ear before it has even heard a footfall. So I stole out of the cottage and over the dark ridges to the place of rocks and sat down, and let the coolness of the night chill and still the fiery dust in my brain. I waited, trembling for the faintest touch, the shyest breathing of the everlasting within my soul, the sign of recognition and forgiveness. I knew it would come. I could not so desire what was not my own, and what is our own we cannot lose. Desire is hidden identity. The darkness grew me heavenward. From the hill the plains beneath slipped away, grown vast and vague, remote and still. I seemed alone with immensity, and there came at last that melting of the divine darkness into the hill within me, for which I prayed. Yes, I still belonged, however humbly, to the heavenly household. I was not outcast. Still, though by a thread fine as that by which a spider hangs from the rafters, my being was suspended from the habitations of eternity. I longed to throw my arms about the hills, to meet with kisses the lips of the seraph wind. I felt the gaiety of childhood springing up through weariness and age, for to come into contact with that which is eternally young is to have that childhood of the spirit. It must attain ere it can be molded by the magician of the beautiful and enter the house of many mansions. I had not always this intimacy with nature. I never felt a light in childhood which faded in manhood into the common light of day, nor do I believe that childhood is any nearer than age to this being. If it were so, what would the spirit have to hope for after youth was gone? I was not conscious in my boyhood of any heaven lying about me. I lived in the city, and the hills from which aid was to come to me were only a far flush of blue on the horizon. Yet I was drawn to them, and as years passed and legs grew longer, I came nearer and nearer, until at last one day I found myself on the green hillside. I came to play with other boys, but years were yet to pass before the familiar places grew strange once more, and the mountains dense with fiery forms and awful as Sinai. While the child is still in its mother's arms, it is nourished by her, yet it does not know it is a mother which feeds it. It knows later in whose bosom it has lain. As the mother nourishes the body, so the mighty mother nourishes the soul. Yet there are but few who pay reverence where reverence is due, and that is because this benign deity is like a mother who indulges the fancies of her children. With some she imparts life to their own thoughts, others she endows with the vision of her own heart. Even of these last some love in silence, being afraid to speak of the majesty which smiled on them, and others deceived think with pride, this vision is my own. I was like these last for a long time. I was aged about 16 or 17 years when I, the slackest and least ideal of boys, with my life already made dark by those desires of body and heart with which we so soon learn to taint our youth, became aware of a mysterious life quickening within my life. Looking back, I know not of anything in friendship, anything I had read, to call this forth. It was, I thought, self-begotten. I began to be astonished with myself, for walking along country roads, intense and passionate imaginations of another world, of an interior nature, began to overpower me. They were like strangers who suddenly enter a house, who brush aside the doorkeeper, and who will not be denied. Soon I knew they were the rightful owners and heirs of the house of the body. And the doorkeeper was only one who was for a time in charge, who had neglected his duty, who had pretended to ownership. The boy who existed before was an alien. He hid himself when the pilgrim of eternity took up his abode in the dwelling. Yet whenever the true owner was absent, the sly creature reappeared and boasted himself as master once more. That being from a distant country, who took possession of the house, began to speak in language difficult to translate. I was tormented by limitations of understanding. Somewhere about me I knew there were comrades who were speaking to me, but I could not know what they said. As I walked in the evening down the lane, scented by the honeysuckle, my senses were expectant of some unveiling about to take place. I felt that beings were looking in upon me out of the true home of man. They seemed to be saying to each other of us, "Soon they will awaken, soon they will come to us again," and for a moment I almost seemed to mix with their eternity. The tinted air glowed before me with intelligible significance like a face, a voice. The visible world became like a tapestry, blown and stirred by winds behind it. Sounds like a mushroom trip. If it would but raise for an instant, I knew I would be in paradise. Every form on that tapestry appeared to be the work of gods. Every flower was a word, a thought. The grass was speech, the trees were speech, the waters were speech, the winds were speech. They were the army of the voice, marching on to conquest and dominion over the spirit. And I listened with my whole being, and when these apparitions would fade away, and I would be the mean and miserable boy once more. So might one have felt who had been servant of the prophet, and had seen him go up in the fiery chariot, and the world had no more light or certitude in it with that passing. I knew these visitations for what they were, and named them truly in my fantasy, for writing then in the first verses of mine, which still seemed to me to be poetry, I said of the earth that we in all things were her dreams. Here's a piece of his poetry. She is wrapped in dreams divine, as her clouds of beauty pass. In our glowing hearts they shine, mirrored there as in a glass. Earth whose dreams are we and they, with her deep heart's gladness fills. All our human lips can say, or the dawn-fired singer trills. I don't know, I think I like his prose better. Yet, such is human nature that I still felt vanity, as if this vision was mine, and I acted like one who comes across the treasure house of a king, and spends the treasure as if it were his own. We may indeed have a personal wisdom, but spiritual vision is not to speak of as ours any more than we can say at the rising of the sun, "This glory is mine." By the sudden uprising of such vanities in the midst of vision, I was often outcast, and found myself in an instant like those warriors of Irish legend, who had come upon a lordly house and feasted there and slept, and when they woke they were on the barren hillside, and the Fayed Fia, I'm not sure what that is, was drawn about that lordly house. I'm gonna look that up, hold on. Okay, according to Wikipedia, the Fay Fiada is a magical mist or veil in Irish mythology, so that makes sense. Yet though the imagination apprehended truly that this beauty was not mine, and hailed it by its heavenly name, for some years my heart was proud, for as the beauty sank into memory, it seemed to become a personal possession, and I said, I imagined this, when I should humbly have said, the curtain was a little lifted that I might see. But the day was to come when I could not deny the mighty mother the reverence due, when I was indeed to know that by what being I had been nourished, and to be made sweet and mad as a lover with the consciousness of her intermingling spirit. The sages of old found that at the close of intense meditation their being was drawn into union with that which they contemplated. All desire tends to bring about unity with the object adored, and this is no less true of spiritual and elemental than of bodily desire. And I, with my imagination more and more drawn to adore an ideal nature, was tending to that vital contact in which what at first was apprehended in fantasy would become the most real of all things. When that certitude came, I felt as Dante might have felt after conceiving of Beatrice close at his side and in the happy world, if, after believing it a dream, half hoping that it might hereafter be a reality, that beloved face before his imagination grew suddenly intense, vivid and splendidly shining, and he knew beyond all doubt that her spirit was truly in that form and had descended to dwell in it, and would be with him forevermore. So did I feel one warm summer day, lying idly on the hillside, not then thinking of anything but the sunlight and how sweet it was to drowse there, when suddenly I felt a fiery heart throb, and knew it was personal and intimate, and started with every sense dilated in intent and turned inwards. And I heard first a music as of bells going away into that wondrous underland whither, as legend relates, the Danaan gods withdrew, and then the heart of the hills was opened to me, and I knew there was no hill for those who were there, and they were unconscious of the ponderous mountain piled above the palaces of light, and the winds were sparkling and diamond clear, yet full of color as an opal, as they glittered through the valley, and I knew the golden age was all about me, and it was we who had been blind to it, but it had never passed away from the world. Okay, we've hit the end of the chapter Retrospect in George William Russell's The Candle of Vision. Okay, folks, I'm going to get another video up here soon. The next chapter is called The Earth Breath, so be on the look for that. If you could hit the subscribe button, that would help me out a lot. Help me out with the YouTube algorithm so that maybe other people could find these videos. Liking and sharing is also greatly appreciated. Please do leave your comments down below about what you thought of this piece. I wish each of you the very best. Thanks. Bye.